Welcome to Oregon Cash Flow Pro. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to continue our part 2 of our analysis on Life180's Allianz Pro Plus Advantage IUL illustration full analysis. Now I say full analysis in quotation marks because if you watched part 1 and you made it to the end of it, you saw at least a couple of places where he clearly didn't understand what he was going over and how he was conveying it to you, the viewer. So we're going to continue along with that. If you haven't seen part 1, we're going to put a link to that right up over here. Check it out. It's a great place to start. Now, we're putting this out as a response because Allianz IUL right now is the best IUL product out there. I think it's important that we understand more about how these things work accurately, as opposed to getting some misinformation or just viewed from a negative viewpoint from somebody who is only interested in selling you a different product. I'm a fan of whole life. I'm a fan of IUL. I like both of them as long as they're designed properly and we have a good product. There are a lot of bad IULs out there, and there are a lot of bad designs out there. So for the most part, his channel covers a lot of the bad IUL stuff. You know, I mean, it really tries to put the fear in you that you should avoid these products like the plague. And most of them you probably should, especially if they're not designed properly. Even a good IUL product, even the best IUL product, can be designed poorly for your situation so that it doesn't end up meeting your needs, whatever those needs are. So it's important that you're working with an agent that is willing to design the best products, that knows the best products, and really understands how they work and can explain that to you, because ultimately it's up to you to understand the products that you buy. So our channel is here to help educate you on all of these things. I do sell life insurance. That is my number one source of income by far. But what I do here on YouTube is educate. That's my goal here. If you're interested in a consultation with me, you can always go to my Calendly link. We'll put that link right here. I do consultations with other agents because I'm always interested in helping them get better designs on the products that they're selling to clients. I do consultations with clients. I sell products. I do reviews of policies. So if you've bought one, you're not sure what it looks like, come check it out. I'll tell you right now, when we meet, there's no guarantee I'm going to say, oh, that's terrible, you should buy something else and you should get that from me. That's not how it works. I've got a lot of reviews that people will point out that they were surprised that that wasn't the case. Like when we meet, I'm not trying to sell you something. In my mind, the products, if we're designing products that meet your need, they basically sell themselves. There's no need to be a salesman and engage in salesmanship tactics in order to get these things out there. So let's hop into our part 2. Again, check out that part 1. A lot of good information already. We're about halfway through the video. That part 1 was a long one. There's a lot of information gone over on these, and we still got a little ways to go. So join me. There will be a part 3. We're going to finish this illustration, but I am planning to do a part 3 where I copy the design of this illustration that he's using here, and we're going to look at some different funding opportunities. What happens if it returns a lower rate of return? What happens if you withdraw or you take loans of a smaller amount than anticipated? What are the odds of lapse in these things? That's what I would like to go over. We'll do that in a part 3. I haven't even created this illustration yet. So I'm just saying this is my plan to do that. And when I do that, I'm going to put that video link up here as well. So we'll get that one attached. Let's make this. There we go. We'll get that attached right up here as well. Okay. So let's hop back into this.
At the end of the day, it's not going to perform as sold. So you need to beware when it comes to that. Your allocation options, the maximum illustrated for this rate for years 1 to maturity is 6%. So it's just showing this. The current part, so you can see there's no cap on these, so there are no cap indexes. The illustrated rate is 6%. 6% on each, and they got a 160 and 165% participation rate. Now, the thing that's important to understand is, on top of all that, these numbers can be reduced. right? It's important to say. So you can see cap participation rates and trigger interest rates are subject to change on any policy anniversary. The indexes available within the policy are constructed to keep track of diverse segments here, boom, of the US or international markets or specific market sectors. Indexes are benchmarks only. Indexes can have different constituents and or weighting methodologies. Some indexes have multiple versions that can weight components that may track the impacts of dividends differently. Although an index may affect your interest credited, you cannot buy or directly participate in or receive dividend payments from any of them through the policy. So this is like the fine print, right? Like where they're telling you all this is the legal jargon that, you know, kind of protects them and insulates them. But it's important to know that these numbers here, these can be reduced, right? Really important. I'm going to get into more of the details when we get to the policy.
So it is important to understand how participation rates work. I did a video on that recently, explaining them in depth, how they come up with those, how they work out. How can they be greater than 100% participation rate? That's a question I often get asked. It's all explained in that video. We'll link that one up here as well. Do check that out.
Fees and the index pages and all that different stuff. This is interesting to me. This is where they go through and they say, all right, here's the history of the performance, right? These years, 2005 through 2021. This is the actual performance. This is the hypothetical return, but none of this is actually true. You can see, you know, this is all just manufactured, right? Like this is historical compound average, historical rates, allocation. Let's see. They do not include the bonuses, is what it says, which is interesting because, you know, they're trying to make it look like, oh, the bonuses are better and it's on top of it. Allocation option.
Okay, so the bonus is better and it is on top of it. This is not all projections. This is the actual historical performance since 2005. That's how long this index has been around. So you can see what the actual return was those years. The hypothetical return, the way that it figures that, this is accounting for the participation rate. And this is going to change based on whatever the participation rate is for your illustration. So if the participation rate goes down, the actual amount that this will assume was credited in those years will be reduced. If the participation rate goes up, these numbers will be higher, but these numbers do not include the bonus. So that is important to understand. When we see the actual return, if you have the classic bonus, which is a 0.9% guaranteed bonus, and in 2005, it was a negative number, you get your 0.9%. If it's in 2006, instead of 10.09, you would get 10.99. That is what the actual return would be based on the assumptions in this illustration. Now remember, the illustration has to make some kind of assumptions. They can't just put something out there and go, well, I don't know what we should plug in here to guess at what might happen in the future. We have to make some kind of assumptions so that we can understand how a product works. Okay. It just has to happen. So as long as we know what those assumptions are, we have something to gauge as to whether it could potentially continue in the future, right? We had a really good average return over the last 10 years, even over the last 15 years, good return, not including the bonus. Okay. There's nothing wrong with these numbers here. Now, you might ask, what was the lowest participation rate? Right now, the participation rate's at 165%. What was the lowest participation rate this has had during that time period? I think it was around 125%. That was the lowest I've seen. Was around 125% for this particular bonus option. Now those participation rates have been going up and they're going to fluctuate throughout the years. They're going to go up and they're going to go down based on the cost of the options, based on the underlying performance of the general account of the insurance company. So it's been a very low interest rate environment for the last decade. That has had a negative impact on insurance companies' general funds. So generally, we've been seeing cap rates and participation rates come down, right? We're on the uptick now. We're in a rising interest rate environment. Their general fund accounts are doing better. We should see those numbers go up. So even though there was a lower participation rate before, Do we want to assume that it'll have that same low participation rate every year that you're going to have this policy for the next 30, 40, 50 years? Not necessarily. I mean, it would be a more conservative way to calculate it, right? But the actual average that you're going to have over the time could be higher or could be lower than whatever it's at right now. So if you want to take a negative viewpoint, you could say, oh, it'll absolutely be lower in the future. And it could be lower, but what will it be on average? You know, because it's going to go up and it's going to go down. So just something to be aware of when it comes to the participation rates.
Options represent both initial and future allocations. No, it doesn't say anything consequential down there on that one. And so this is going to be the same thing for the other index, the PIMCO Balance ER Fund. Same deal. Same deal. They don't have the 25-year hypothetical look back history period on this, which is crazy to me that they're able to do that. The time frame isn't even
crazy that you're able to do what? That it hasn't been around for 25 years. What makes that crazy? There are new products that come out all the time, new ways to invest, not just in the stock market, but in anything. There's always new things coming about. So just because it hasn't been around for a long time doesn't make it crazy, in my opinion. But I guess I don't understand why it's being framed that way. That could just be his way of expressing himself with this. Something to keep in mind, but it rubs me wrong.
Isn't even that long. It's got a 12-year surrender period, which is really important to understand. I got negative ARB written here. So why? Oh yeah. So you have the option. A lot of options also say is that you can, if you don't want to do the index loan, where it's 5% on policies. So if you take an index loan in this policy, you have to pay 5% loan cost. So if you have $1 million of loans out during your retirement years, that's $50,000 a year of interest just to manage that loan. So if the market goes down, not only do you have the insurance costs that go along with it when you're 72 years old, but now you have $50,000. If you have $1 million loan out because of all your previous income, you have $50,000 more of loan interest that you have to manage that will come out of your cash value, increasing your net cost of insurance, the net amount at risk, which will then drive it up.
Okay, that's twice that he's mentioned this. I didn't bring this up the last time, but it does not increase your net amount at risk. Your net amount at risk is based on the amount of money that you have in the policy. And that means that the insurance company has to have a certain amount of death benefit above and beyond whatever your cash value is. There has to be a certain net amount at risk. And it's a higher percentage the more cash value you have in the policy. So when your cash value goes down, that does not increase the net amount at risk. You could actually have that death benefit reduced along with it. So it stays at the minimum net amount at risk that's allowed. And then what happens when the cash value goes up? Oh, the amount of insurance goes up along with it. And you can see that happen inside of these illustrations. The death benefit goes down and then it goes back up later on in the policy. So I don't know why he keeps mentioning that, but not accurate.
That's what I showed you on the last illustration. That's important to understand. Is there a potential to earn positive arbitrage? Yeah, but it's not much. And there's a lot of risk to take that chance, especially in retirement years when you're going to want it the most. Fixed loans, look at this, 2.91% in year 1 through 10. You get credited when you choose the fixed loans. You only get a 2% crediting. And if you choose these loan options and you only get credited that amount, that's going to decimate your ability for your policy to grow. It's going to increase your net amount at risk in the policy over time compared to the illustrated rates. And ultimately, that's going to wind up being a drag on the policy and increasing the chance of lapsing.
Boy, he just made that sound really bad. Only problem is it's not accurate. For the first 10 years, you do have some negative arbitrage if you use that type of a loan. And after those 10 years, you're going to pay 1.96%. You're going to get a credit of 2%. That's a wash loan. Okay. That's basically the equivalent of doing a withdrawal without actually withdrawing the money and paying taxes on the gains. Okay. There is no risk of lapse when you do a fixed loan because you're going to get credited the same amount. Now, that just means based on the loan, there's no risk of lapse. You could still lapse the policy. So like if you borrowed too much money out of the policy, meaning you're leaving very, very little cash value in there, and you do a wash loan on what you borrowed and the rest of it doesn't make any money, but you still have expenses that come out of it and you're not adding any new money to it. That is where your risk of lapse comes in. Okay. That has to do with managing the policy and making sure that you just don't borrow too much in relation to the expenses that are in there, what you're putting into it, and what you've borrowed out, right? That's a management perspective. It's not going to come out of nowhere. So just utilizing the fixed loan option, the wash loan option, does not increase the lapse possibility. In fact, it reduces it compared to the participating index loan when we make the assumption that you've pulled out a ton of income and then you get a 0 credit year. There's a greater chance that it could reduce that cash value by too much and cause a lapse with that participating index loan. So we went over that in part 1 a little bit more as to why that wouldn't actually happen, or the odds of it happening are very low unless you just don't manage your policy, right? But to complain about the fixed loan, that's kind of silly, especially when you think about what's the alternative that this guy pitches? Whole life insurance. What kind of loans are available in whole life insurance? Well, you have a direct recognition, which is similar to a participating index loan, and you have a non-direct recognition, which is similar to the participating index loan, and you have a direct recognition, which is similar to the fixed loans. And in fact, most whole life carriers do direct recognition, which is essentially the fixed loan option. It's the same thing. You get a credit and you pay interest and you get an offsetting credit. That's what this is. I don't know why he's making it sound like it's completely off the wall to think you can use it inside here and not have to worry about a lapse. But go look at what he pitches for whole life, and it's almost the exact same thing. There really isn't much difference. Now, for some reason, in one of his comments to me, he made it sound like there's a world of difference. I'm waiting with bated breath to find out what that world of difference is between those loan types, because I don't see it. I clearly understand how these things work. I don't see the fear. I don't see the reason to fear how these loans work. Whether you're in whole life or you're in an IUL, if you borrow too much money, your policy can lapse. Okay, that's the bottom line. There's nothing inherently more risky about an IUL if you're utilizing that fixed loan option. Okay.
These things are like trigonometry, and they're being sold as if they're like basic multiplication, right? So it's important to understand this. So the rate credited will also include any applicable interest bonus earned via the interest bonus rider, right? Like, so that's what I was talking about on the last page, that it'll make it look good, but it's not as good as it sounds.
What did he just add in there? That doesn't make any sense. It's like he's just saying words and then creating a conclusion that has nothing to do with the words that he just said. That it makes no sense to me. Very odd.
The illustration is not an offer, contract, or promise for the future of the policy performance. Here we go. Taxation of life insurance. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You can read it, pause it. Everybody knows I've done a lot of conversations about that. Glossary of terms. All right. So this was interesting. There's a couple things I noticed here. So usually we have increasing death benefit, which is option B, or we have level death benefit, which is option A. This is option C, which is equal to the specified amount of your policy plus the total premium you've paid into the policy. Basically an increasing death benefit, but they call it something else. I've never seen this before. My question is why? I'm going to ask Bobby Samuelson what's going on with this next time I talk to him, because I'm sure he knows the answer to this.
So I answered in his comment section what it was. Option C is, so option B, the death benefit is going to increase by the exact dollar amount that your cash value increases. Option C increases by how much money you've paid into the policy. Okay, the death benefit. That makes sure that whatever death benefit pays out is going to pay out
exactly what you've paid into the policy plus the original death benefit.
It's kind of like a return of premium option. Okay, there's only a slight difference between option B and option C. Option B is generally what we use. I almost use that one exclusively. I don't really ever look at or utilize the option C. There's a small difference in the cost of insurance in the early years where your death benefit is going to be a little bit higher in the early years. With the option C, it'll be lower in the later years under option C. Under option B, the death benefit's going to be a little bit lower in the beginning years, because think about if you put $100,000 into a policy. I know it's a lot of money, but we're going to use that as an example because it's easier to understand these bigger numbers. If you put $100,000 into a policy and you have $1 million death benefit, okay, the cash value in that first year is probably, with a good design, might be like $90,000 in cash value. Okay, so under option B, your death benefit is going to be the $1 million plus the 90,000 cash value. So your overall death benefit is going to be $1,090,000. With option C, your overall death benefit is going to be $1 million plus the 100,000 that you paid into it, because it's the premiums you put into it. So your overall death benefit's 1.1 million. Now, because there's not actually that extra 100,000 in there, there's only 90,000 in cash value. You're essentially paying for an extra $10,000 of life insurance. Okay, so you're going to pay for extra in that case. In what you pay for extra will vary as the policy gets older, because at some point there's going to be more cash value in there, but the death benefit is just going to match the original death benefit plus what you've paid into it. Whereas in option B, it's going to match the original death benefit plus all of the cash value. So in option B, the actual death benefit you're paying for stays steady the whole time until you make a change to it. In option C, it's going to vary. It'll start out higher and it'll eventually get lower. So we do see different MEC limits. It should be a lower MEC limit with the option C, which is often why I don't even look to use it. Okay, we're always looking to maximize the amount of money that we can put into these things in relation to the underlying costs. And we do that utilizing option B.
I don't, quite frankly, and I don't get stumped with questions very often. I have yet to see this, and I'm kind of fascinated by it, quite frankly.
So Allianz is not the only carrier that offers this, but it is something that you don't see in the whole life space. So it's not surprising to me that he's not familiar with it. If you're in the whole life space, you just don't come across this. But other carriers call it option C, a return of premium type of death benefit. So that's one reason why it's easy for me to understand based on this language what it's doing, because I know what it does in other policies as well. Different carriers call different things different names. And when we're familiar with all of these things, we can kind of suss out the differences when we understand that language.
It's interesting. So alternative crediting rate and charges, right here, referred to as the alternative scenario values, are calculated using the current fixed interest crediting rate and our current administrative and insurance charges. So what I'm going to do, so this is the important thing here, alternative crediting rate and charges. What that is, like, basically the alternate column in the illustration. You'll notice there's a current, there's guaranteed, and then there's an alternate. What this is saying is that the alternate column, referred to as the alternative scenario, values are calculated using the current fixed interest rate crediting, meaning 5%. So it shows what would your policy perform as at a 5% performance, and our current administrative insurance charges. Okay, so assuming charges don't get more expensive, or cap rates don't go down, or participation rates don't go down, which they most likely will, which will have a drag once again.
So that has nothing to do with cap rates and participation rates. It's just the fixed interest account. But that fixed interest account can adjust. Right now, it's higher than probably it's ever been. It's at 5% because the general fund of the insurance account is doing very well. You saw earlier in the part 1 video that the average fixed interest rate for all Allianz policies issued since 2006 was 4.11%. Okay. A lot of other carriers, their fixed interest rates are in the 2.5% range, and they've been that for as long as I've been around. So it is a little higher in here. Just understanding that when it comes to that fixed scenario, the changing caps and the changing participation rates doesn't affect that. It is just the fixed account, but that can change.
And on everything, right? And so this is the guaranteed scenario. I will say this is better than most IULs as far as this goes. On the front end here, this $14,000 of net cash value year one available. You know, going down through year 10 on a guaranteed basis, you got 142, you know, versus 140 on.
Yeah, it's better than most IULs because this is a very well-designed policy, as we talked about in our part one. It's a very well-designed policy, and it does have that 0.9% guaranteed growth. There's not a whole lot of other IULs out there that have that guarantee. There's one that has a 1% guarantee. Most all of the other ones, they're lower guarantees. At any rate, they might have a higher starting one. I know at least one of them has a higher one that starts out, but they only guarantee 0.5%. So when it comes to our guaranteed scenario, I usually ignore the guaranteed scenario. It's basically guaranteed never to happen, because it's going to, and he may mention this, the guaranteed scenario assumes no growth in the indexes ever for the life of the policy and maximum policy charges. Okay. Most every insurance company, they don't charge you the maximum charges that they can charge you for your cost of insurance. They have a current rate, and then spelled out in your contract will be the maximum rate. And whole life basically works the same way. They have mortality rates and things inside there that they can change. But for the most part, insurance companies reserve that ability to change it, not on a whim. They don't just change it on a whim, but like when their bottom lines are actually impacted by changing actuarial rates, you might see an increase in there. There are some carriers that tout that they've never, ever increased their current rate. So they're not only are they not at the most charges they can do, but never once have they even raised it at all. So just something to keep in mind as far as the guaranteed scenarios inside of an IUL. This is one of the risks in an IUL as compared to whole life. It's not as good, just like it says right there. Not as good as whole life. In whole life, almost every product out there has a guarantee now of at least 3%. There's one product I'm aware of that has a 2%. There could be more out there because the guarantees in whole life have to be between 2 and 4%, or 2 and 3.9%. I'm aware of one that's at 3.9, one that's at 2%. Most all of the other ones are at 3%. So I just use 3% as the kind of catch-all. We assume that whole life has 3% guarantees. So if you're concerned about the guaranteed scenarios, if your interest is not in the growth, but in protection, whole life is a better choice. You do have better guarantees. But when it comes to growth potential, that's where you got to weigh what is the growth potential and what am I guaranteed? And then what are the risks? And some people are going to choose whole life. Some people are going to choose IUL. But let's do it based on facts, not just using emotionally charged words that kind of paint things in more of a negative light than they should be.
You know, because the surrender period at the end of the surrender in year 12, you can see we're about even. But look at this. Just right away on the guaranteed value, this policy starts to go down. So this person at 18 years old put money into the policy, and it goes and it grows. And then by the time they hit 52 years old, which is before they were even going to pay income on a guaranteed basis, this thing lapses. Like, you know, this.
So let's understand why that's happening. Okay. Remember, I said the guaranteed scenario assumes no growth in the index ever and maximum insurance charges. So not only is the cash value not going up, but we have this insurance amount that's an increasing death benefit that's going to keep going up, or it's going to maintain the same death benefit and just go up along with that cash value. But if the cash value doesn't go up, we still have that same amount of death benefit that we have to pay for. And this is annual renewable term. The cost of that insurance gets a little bit more expensive every single year. You can see the policy charges, they kind of go up a little bit every single year, right? Let's go back just slightly. I want to see that page before. Okay, so right here. What is happening Why is our cash value starting to slowly decline? Well, there's no growth in the index. They've stopped putting money into it, and we still have $1,000 charge. Our policy charge is $1,009 in year 12. Well, what happens when you don't get a credit, but you do get a policy charge? Your values are going to go backwards. So we've got to understand where the assumptions are happening in here. The reality of the situation is, if you had this policy and it never grew ever, you would probably decide to stop funding it before the 10 years are up. Like realistically, we would be looking at what changes could we possibly make to this thing, because there might be better options out there. Now, if the stock market has been going down 10 years in a row, maybe there's other things that are a concern as opposed to what's happening in here. You might actually be okay with what's happening inside your policy, that your money's basically protected, because if it does have an up year, it's going to go up, right? It's like dollar cost averaging in the market while the market's dropping, except you're not actually losing money while the market's dropping. You have your insurance costs, but you're not actually losing money. So as soon as it starts to go up again, you get to participate when it goes up. If we look at the history of these indexes, over the last 17 years, there was 3 years that it went negative or zero, right? This guaranteed scenario assumes every single year is zero or negative. And that just doesn't happen in the stock market. It doesn't happen with these indexes. In fact, it happens less with these indexes than the actual stock market. If we think of the S&P 500 as the stock market, because that's a traditional benchmark. Over the last 17 years, the S&P had like 5 or 6 0 years or negative years, right? So more often than our volatility scenarios or our volatility indexes. That's why we like to use these volatility indexes, because we don't have as many 0 years and we get uncapped when it does decide to go back up. So something to keep in mind, the guaranteed scenario. Now, he makes it sound like, oh my goodness, look at this. Ha, 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 it lapses. Yeah, but the reality is you're going to manage your policy. You're probably not going to keep it that long. Like you could 1035 in exchange. If you get into this, acknowledging the potential risks, and it doesn't pay out, you could 1035 exchange into a whole life later on. Why not just start with a whole life? Well, it's all going to depend on what your goals are, right? Are you willing to take on a risk in a part of your portfolio? A lot of my clients, yes, they are willing to take on a little bit of risk. It's not a whole lot of risk. It's not like the IUL is just, you got to watch every single where you step or you're going to hit a landmine with these things. Like a lot of people like to portray it that way, but that's not the situation. You actually do have downside protection and growth potential, right? So there are some risks. If you're okay with that, maybe a good part of your money can be allocated to these, realizing that if the worst case scenario starts to play out, there are ways to mitigate it. In fact, if I had this policy or one of my clients had this policy, I would say, if you don't need that much death benefit, we could reduce the death benefit. The cost will be lower. If this isn't performing for 10 years, I would be looking for something else. I would probably be finding the best savings account that I could, which in fact is generally a whole life policy, right? I tend to view those as a good savings. So I own both. I own whole life, I own IUL, because my whole life is very safe. I take on a little bit more risk in my IUL, but I have greater growth potential. So, and currently my IULs are outperforming my illustrations. So if you've seen my videos on that, I'm very transparent with my policies that I bought, how I design them, how they get funded, and where their values are at. And I'm going to be doing an update on those here soon as well.
A guaranteed value, this policy starts to go down. So this person at 18 years old put money into the policy, and it goes and it grows. And then by the time they hit 52 years old, which is before they were even going to pay income on a guaranteed basis, this thing lapses.
Now, the other thing to notice where it lapses here, there's a distribution. This says there's a distribution of almost $100,000. The reason this lapses at 51 is because the guaranteed scenario is going to assume that you're going to take out an income stream the exact same amount as you would have under the current scenario that assumes 6.9% growth every year in the policy. Is that going to happen? No. So like if you kept this policy and you're like, eventually it's going to come up, and it just never does. It keeps getting 0, 0, 0. And the insurance company's charging you the maximum that they can charge you, and they never stop. You're not going to try and pull out $77,000 a year, causing a policy lapse, which is what happens here. In fact, if you didn't pull out any cash out of that at all, the policy would continue to last, I'm guessing, for probably another 30 years, maybe longer. We'll find out when I do the part 3 for this.
It can't even hit their target on a guaranteed basis with how they funded it. Yet somehow it's going to create $5.4 million of income predictably. It's
the guaranteed scenario has nothing to do with the projection of potential income. We've got to understand that. Nothing to do with it. We got to remember those assumptions that are being made in that. The assumptions being made in the guaranteed scenario are more likely not to happen. Like the odds of them happening are so slim that I don't even consider them to be a realistic scenario in any case.
It's absolutely insane. So I don't know why I wrote 3% there, because it's 5%, because they're using the alternate income, right? So
most of the time, the alternate scenario is just halfway between the current and the guaranteed, which is 0. So that's probably why he had the 3% written there.
That is, the current scenario is at 6%, the alternate's at 5%. And so it's important to understand that. So as we go down through this, as we look at, we got, all right, the same thing, 10 years in, it's showing the current is at 208, the alternate's at 196. I'm going to just skip to the next page. And what we're going to do here is we're going to see on the alternate level, assuming, once again, I don't know why I have 3% there. My apologies, 5%. Assuming that it does 5%, what you're seeing here is at 62, this thing lapses, right?
Again, it's lapsing because it's assuming you're going to take out the exact same amount of money that you would have if it was a 6.9% return. Okay. Now, the difference is not a 1% credit difference. The difference is actually 1.9, because in the alternate scenario, if this is 5% that they're assuming here, which we're going to assume that it is, because that's what it said up in the other, on the other page, right? And I haven't done the math on this to look at it, but we know in the current scenario that it's 6% plus the 0.9 bonus. This one is just the fixed interest account. It's not the bonus. So it's just the 5%. So the difference is actually at 1.9%. And over the course of 40 years of compounding, 1.9% is a huge difference. Very, very big difference. So that's how compounding works. But again, the reason it lapses is because it's going to assume that you're going to try and take out the maximum amount of money that you would have had it been a 6.9% return. The reality is that's not going to happen. You have to talk with your agent. You're going to come up with a potentially safe withdrawal amount, and you're going to monitor it so that you don't end up lapsing.
Yeah, somehow, once again, it's just going to go gangbusters on the current scenario because of the arbitrage, right? Like the illustrated arbitrage that I've already.
So it's not necessarily just the arbitrage that this illustration relies on when it comes to the good numbers. Like this could actually perform very well. In this scenario, they put in 16,000 for 10 years. You put in 164,000, and at age 50, you've got $900,000 in there after the assumed expenses that we're showing in here. Like that's not bad. That's actually pretty good. And it's actually a lower assumed rate than the average has been for the last 15 years. Is it realistic that it will be that? No. It will be either higher or lower, right? It's not going to average exactly that much. But is it a possibility that it can happen? Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's not because of the arbitrage. The arbitrage only has to do with what happens after you start taking loans out. And it has to do with what you assume is going to be a safe withdrawal amount. So Bottom line, if you run in this illustration without an income stream, let's look and compare it to a whole life policy. You know, that I do that with my clients all the time when we're trying to decide what might best meet their scenario or how they want to allocate their funds. They've got the choice, and we're going to look at the numbers. Now, something to understand about human psychology: when you see big numbers, you tend to think that's likely to happen. Okay. It's one of the reasons why we want to try to set expectations on these things. So when I'm showing people a whole life and an IUL, and I don't just give them the numbers and say, here you go. What do you think? Because basically the numbers are going to look better in the IUL. They need to understand that the IUL carries a little bit more risk. We don't actually know what it's going to do, but we do have the information of what it has done in the recent past, right? And ultimately, they're going to have to decide, though, because it's not my money, it's their money. They're going to have to decide which way do they want to go to take the risk. And it's not like you have to do one or the other. You could certainly get both if that's what's going to help best meet your needs. Okay. But just something to be aware of. The numbers in this, if it performs at this, are going to look a lot better than what you'll see in a whole life illustration. And if it actually plays out that way, you're going to be pretty happy you bought this product. Oftentimes the numbers are significantly more. Okay. Even if we're not pushing the IUL illustration to the maximum. Okay. It's just a reality of the fact that you do have greater growth potential inside of the IUL. Now, part of that, especially on these longer funding periods like this, because you have so many years of compounding when the costs are very low. Okay, you get to take advantage of the low cost of this annual renewable term insurance while you're young. It doesn't actually get very expensive until you get older. And by that time, we should have already made a whole bunch of cash in it. And then it's just a matter of how do you want to access it.
Explain it. I'm not going to beat that horse too hard. That is what it is. But this policy lapses at age 62, right? That's gross. And that is huge difference with only 1% of the crediting difference.
Again, it only lapses because it's assuming that you're taking out that $77,000 a year. If you didn't take out that $77,000 a year, if you reacted to the reality on the ground that instead of $900,000, you only had $687,000, you're not going to try and take out $77,000 a year. So to get hung up on this lapsing at age 62 without explaining the context around that, I think he just doesn't understand how these illustrations work. That's the only explanation that I can come up with.
That's right. Like, so think about this. This is assuming that it's only 1% less than the 6%, which is
1.9.
a very bold statement on the company's part to think that they're going to do that when they can only get their own general fund 4.5%, right? Which, by the way, is about a 40% increase of what they're doing for themselves, right? So that's already bold enough, right? So why in the world would only a 1% difference between 6% and 5% have this policy lapse there, not get you the income and not? It's because of the fact of how the compounding of the loans and the expenses and everything gets. And this does not even account for the fact, well, I should say this is assuming that your current charges and fees and expenses inside of the policy remain as illustrated and don't get worse, which historically speaking, they have and they will, most likely. So 5% again, must have been thinking something else when I kept writing the 3. So that is what it is. But you can see here, this keeps going on. The accumulated value, the cash value, the net distributions on a non-guarantee basis, the current scenario keeps going. This is where the income gets crazy, right? 3 million in income by 92. And you can see it's 3.6 million by the time you're 97. But you can see here, it's the cash value is growing. The right here, it shows you got $3.6 million. Okay, so here, I want to do this. This is so fun. I'm such a nerd. So you got 3.6 million, but you have 15.3 million. I'm just going to kind of get close, right? 15.3 million and 3.6 million. Oh, yeah, 3.6 million. Right. So what do we have? We have 7, 12, 11,700,000 of loans and loans out there due on this. So what will happen is if this, like, this is assuming with this scenario, because you got 15,300, I'm going to just erase that, $15,346 of net cash of accumulated value, 1 million of net cash value, but you have 3,650,000 of distributions. So what do we have here? Actually, so what we need to do here is we say, all right, we got cash. So it's actually, I did that wrong. It's 15 million minus the 1 million, which let's just call it 14 million for the sake of it. And then we have the
his original note basically was correct, because yes, you have taken that much in income, but there's been interest charges that have been growing and compounding. So that's why it's not 11.7 in loans, 11.7 million in loans. It's 14.2 at this particular time. Okay. Now, if you've actually able to do that and you're at this point, good on you. I mean, obviously you've chosen to take on some significant risks that he's going to point out here. I would say that most likely you've mitigated some of those risks earlier on by taking out less amount of money or utilizing the wash loan option, in which case you really don't have to worry about the things that he's going to be bringing up. But under all the current assumptions, there's definitely some valid concerns. If you still have this much in loans and there's that much cash value, what happens if there's a 0 year? What happens if there's multiple 0 years? There certainly could be. There's definitely concerns.
Distributions is,
but keep in mind, you're 97 years old at this point.
3.6. So we got about 10.5 million ish in loans on this thing. And those loans, that's what is actually due. That's what's
he got himself turned around. Just remember, this is the actual amount of loans, 14.2 million. I think that's an accurate number. It's the difference between these two numbers, the accumulation value and the cash value.
Going to be your at risk for when the market has a bad year and the growth of the policy cannot sustain those loans, right? If like, because remember, this is assuming this $15 million is going to go up 5%. And if that $15 million actually in this, it's assuming it's going to go up 5.5%. So on the loan money, so it's assuming you're going to get credited all that money and that's going to cover the loan expense. But if it doesn't, if you have a 0 year here, what's going to happen is it's not going to cover it and it's going to take that out of there. So I'm going to just get my phone real quick and tell you what the expense of this is going to be. And it's kind of astronomical. Okay. 15 million time, or actually it's 12 million. Or what did I say? 10.5 million. Sorry, let's just go 10.5 million times 0.05. You're looking at $525,000 of loan expenses alone. That's going to be taken out of the 1.13. That is going to decimate the entire account. So when people say,
and it will actually be more than that because it's actually 14.2 million in loans. So yes, this would definitely be a concern and should be a concern to anybody. If you have this policy and you're in this situation, that's more risk than I'm certainly willing to take on. I would imagine it'd be more risk than you're willing to take on as well. One other thing I want to add though, remember we're talking averages. This dials it back to a 5.5% growth on the loaned amount. Okay. What's our average return been for the last, under the same assumptions, for the last 80 years in this policy? It's been 6.9%. Okay. So it's possible that the accumulated value and the cash value could actually be quite a bit higher than what this is assuming once you started taking out loans. So this is a little more conservative when we think of just a 0.5% arbitrage. It's not just getting 5.5% in the index, it's getting that on average. In 2017, these indexes returned 14%. when you account for the participation rate and then the bonus, your credit's over 20% on these things. In fact, I think it's closer to 25% with this particular bonus option, or 24. That's significant. If that happened the year before, you got a 0 year, cool. No big deal. That 0 year is going to roll right off your back, right? But there is a risk in here when you do get multiple 0 years. You got to recognize that cash value, you want to make sure that it covers a potential 0 year. Now, I happen to like the fact that when Allianz makes an income assumption, the cash value doesn't drop down to basically 0. Okay, there are other carriers out there that do abuse this by drawing that cash value to almost 0. National Life is one of those carriers where the income, it doesn't matter how much cash value is in it. Like it will give you an income stream projection that draws that cash value down to like $10,000. So talk about risk in that scenario. And if I understand things correctly, that's where Chris came from. Chris came from National Life Group. Like he used to work for them. So when I think about the perspective that he's coming from, there's probably even more reason for him to be skeptical because of the environment that he was in there with that carrier and the projections that they allow on their illustration. There's other carriers that will allow you to illustrate an income stream all the way down to 0, triggering the loan protection, the loan protection rider. Those are super aggressive, very, very aggressive. We don't make those same kind of assumptions inside the Allianz IULs. It doesn't allow you to. In fact, it maintains quite a bit of cash value compared to what you'll see in those other carriers. So I happen to like what Allianz does with their illustrations as far as what they limit the ability of agents to do. Is it still unrealistic? Yeah. Yeah, it's probably unrealistic that you're going to take this much risk when you get into retirement, holding that much loans. But I think that's kind of part of the limitations in general of trying to illustrate an income stream. So I do think, and I think I mentioned this in part 1, I do think it's a good idea with the AG 49B coming out, if they're going to not allow arbitrage to be shown for income streams. I have no issues with these numbers coming down and being more conservative. Okay, but when you look at the overall space, Allianz is more conservative than the other carriers out there in this regard. And this illustration in particular dialed it back from what it could have been illustrated at. So this agent, and it wasn't me, this agent, whoever designed this one, you know, they were not just pushing the highest numbers that they can push with this particular client. Is it still unrealistic? Probably. I probably wouldn't end up pulling that much out, but we don't know what's going to happen in the future. What happens if these indexes keep the average and this person gets to age 50 and there was a projection to be 900,000 in there, but there's 1.2 million. Now suddenly they could take out 77 and probably be safe. They could easily take out 77 and use the fixed loan option without all of this risk. Those are definitely possible scenarios that could play out. We just don't know. So you, the client, have to decide, you know, which product to get, what design to get, how much risk are you willing to take on for the potential gains?
Oh, it's going to take 3, 4, 5 years of bad years in a row to decimate a policy. No, it can happen very quickly. It can happen in 2 or 3 years. And it's once it happens and you get behind in these things because of the fact that you're not paying back the loans, the expenses and charges compound against you, and these things get out of control and implode all the time.
So something to keep in mind too is you can switch. If you were in that situation and you were using participating index loans and you borrowed out tons of money like that, and now you're in a position where like, uh-oh, I just had a 0 year. I've got almost no cash value. What happens if I get another 0 year? Well, you could switch. You could switch in almost every IUL out there. You can change from a participating index loan to a fixed rate wash loan. Although not a lot of the other, there are some IUL carriers out there that their loans are not necessarily guaranteed to wash. Allianz's is guaranteed to wash. So it's another one of the reasons I like the Allianz product, because they do have all of those guarantees. But just something to keep in mind. In general, you can change your loan type so you don't have to take on that risk.
So like I said, I just kind of made the note, the midpoint scenario. It says 3% non-guaranteed. That's why I put that there. But it's the 5% like it said on the other one. But it's policy charges could get worse than this as well.
That part's
you
true.
Eliminate the 0.9% bonus and add the 1% charges, and this is like just a crazy assumption that all this is going to happen.
Okay, so he made notes here. He must have been talking with somebody else when he made his original notes on these things. But why would you eliminate the 0.9 bonus? That 0.9 bonus is actually guaranteed. There's no reason to assume that it gets eliminated on a whim. Like if you want it, you get it. It's guaranteed per the contract that you will have that 0.9 bonus every single year in the policy if you want to use that bonus option. You do have two other bonus options. One of those other bonus options has a 1% charge, which is where I'm assuming his note here came from. He's probably saying if you don't take the guaranteed bonus and you add the 1% charges, now we're looking at some type of a fair assumption. That's what I'm getting from those notes. But that's what would happen in this scenario. There's no reason to eliminate that 0.9 bonus though. If you were in a product that was underperforming, you're probably going to take advantage of every guaranteed bonus that's available. In this case, the 0.9, and you're not going to be choosing the bonus option that costs you extra. The only reason you would be choosing the bonus option that costs you extra is because the index has been performing exceptionally well and it's been worthwhile. So in one of my policies, the first year I used the 40% bonus option with the 1% charges. I paid $25 the first year for that 1% charge, and I end up with a credit of $50. Because the bonus performed really well. It was like I locked in and got a 9% average or 9% credit, something like that. The next year, I got a 0. I paid $50 for the 1% because I put more money into my account the next year. Plus, I had a slight amount of growth. So I paid $50, but I didn't get a credit. So by year 3, when I started year 3, I'm basically even. I've paid $75 for that 1% charges, and I've got an offsetting credit of $75 from that actual bonus. Now, I also got credit from the non-bonus part of it, because I'm just talking about the amount that's allocated and what I get as a bonus from that 40%. The actual credit was higher than that, higher than $25 that first year, because that's only a small part of the growth in the policy.
This is why I say when I say an IUL is going to perform worse than it's illustrated, it's because of all this nonsense that we're seeing. Sorry if I'm sounding a little bit emotional about it, but it's massively irritating.
Yeah, you are sounding a little bit emotional, and I'm not sure what you pointed out just then that guarantees it's not going to perform the way that it's illustrated. We have no guarantees that it's not going to perform the way it's illustrated in a worse capacity. It could perform better. It could perform worse. I don't know that the odds are more likely one way or the other at this point. This is a little bit of a conservative scenario based on the history of the index. Okay.
So, all right, here we go. Policy loan ledger. This is interesting. This is going to be fun. So you can see there's no policy loans. We got the cash value right here in this column. That's the cash value on a current scenario basis, not a guaranteed basis, with a current 6% assumption basis. That is what it is. We're not taking policy loans until we're like 54 in this. And that is what it is. Now, here we go. So you can see the cash value is growing. By the time you start taking income, you're at $800,000. assumed with that 6% rate. Now we have the index loan, 73, 77, 66, 76. We got loan charges of that, and then we have loan credits. So you can see this spread right here between the two of a couple $100 is what allows this number to keep growing, right? These numbers to keep growing, and it allows the illustration to be healthy. That's the positive arbitrage that we're talking about.
Yep.
You can see but the gap right here between $8,196 and $9,396. That's positive arbitrage that's baked in. They're assuming that that is going to happen. Now, that's, I don't know about you, but I don't know another time where there's been, you know, this period of time where there's been no down years. There's definitely going to be worse years.
There's definitely going to be down years, but there's also going to be up years. When we look at the average, there have been 0 years and there have been really high years in the actual return in the index. But the average has been, with this bonus option and this participation rate, the average has been just over 10%. This is assuming 5.5% on the loaned amounts. It's not assuming 10%. And it's not assuming that there's no 0 years. It's assuming on average. So go back to 2017, when you would have gotten a 24% credit. You're paying 5%, you got a 24% credit. So on the loaned amount, in this scenario, your charge is 19,000, your credit was 22. Your cash value was, let's see, your loan balance was 400,000. If you got a 24% credit, that's $100,000 credit, over $100,000 credit on the loaned amount. So instead of a $22,000 credit, you went up 100,000. We can't illustrate that though. We're not allowed to illustrate that happening that year. We're subject to an average return. Okay. Now, if you just plugged in 0 years, but you didn't figure in that there are some years that it performed above that, is that accurate? I don't think that's accurate. So we can't just take these numbers and go from here down and say, this isn't realistic because it doesn't show any 0 years. That's already factored in to the average return, which it's assuming at 5.5%. Now, can we be more conservative? Yeah, we don't have to assume arbitrage at all. And I would feel more comfortable with that illustration and the income that's projected there. I would certainly feel most comfortable with the wash loan assumption as the income. Okay. But do I think that's likely to happen, that we're going to end up with a 5% average or a 5.5% average? No, I hope not. I mean, that's one of the reasons I really like these index options, because we can see what they've actually done in the past. They've done very well. These are actually really good products that I feel comfortable having my money grow based on those particular indexes. I like volatility indexes. So my hope is that we're going to outperform these illustrations. That is the expectation that I hold in my mind for my policies. Is it guaranteed to happen? No, of course not. Am I willing to take that risk? Absolutely.
Years, and if you have policy loans out on this, as you get older and as the cost of insurance go, not only do you have these extra charges that'll be more expensive, but now because of the outstanding loan balance is going to be higher in this column, the net amount at risk, because the cash value will be worse because it's got to support that, right? Now the net amount at risk goes up, which increases the cost of insurance, right? Goes up as well, which then compounds against it because that's got to eat from the cash value. And
I'm not sure where he's getting at here. Again, he's talking about the net amount at risk going up. The net amount at risk is a reflection of how much insurance, how much death benefit you have to have above and beyond the cash value. If your cash value goes down, the net amount at risk doesn't go up. The amount of death benefit you're required to have can go down. Now, if you just have a level death benefit, or you have, if you just have a level death benefit, or somehow the policy isn't managing itself to adjust, which if we go back to the other ledgers, we can see the death benefit is actually changing year to year in order to maintain that minimum net amount at risk. Okay, so to just say in here that the net amount at risk will go up. Either you don't understand what's happening with that, or you're just putting this out there as a scare tactic without the evidence to back that up, because that's not what happens. We have in these illustrations the assumption that it's the guaranteed minimum amount is the death benefit that's required in here. And that's going to adjust if the loan balance goes up or down. It's going to affect your cash value, and that's going to affect the amount of net amount at risk that you're required to have.
And you're going to take loans to pay that, because that's how it goes out of the cash value if you don't cut a check for it, which you're not going to because you're in retirement. And so then what happens is the outstanding loan balance goes up. And so this is what I'm saying. This stuff is insanity, right? So the loan balance compounds against you. You can see by the time you're 67, you got $2 million of loans out there with only $1.3 million of income, right? So you're talking about all this stuff. You're paying interest on this $2 million. And on bad years, that's what whacks you, right?
Good.
And so it's really, really important to see. Actually, so now I was talking about before, I guess I got a little bit ahead of myself. So this gap right here, you can see is about $500,000 of positive arbitrage. That's what allows this thing to keep going. And it's not going to be that way with AG 49B coming out. It's going to fix it. Difference will increase the cost of insurance. Compound that difference, I should say, it will increase if we reduce this positive arbitrage. We'll do what I just said: increase the cost of insurance, which will compound the problem, which will make this policy lapse.
That's not accurate. The changes that are going to be coming up that will do away with this positive arbitrage are not going to increase the cost of insurance, because in actuality, your assumed cash value will be lower if it's not assuming that you have that growth. Reality is the stream of income will illustrate lower. It won't let you pull that same amount. So the amount of death benefit that you have to purchase at that age, it may even remain fairly similar, but that the cost of insurance won't go up because of that.
Even faster, but you can see here, no, I was right. At 92, I was right. I said 10.5 million. It was 10.788 million is the total outstanding loan balance.
So he's trying to say he was right with the other one, which was actually at age 97, and we're looking at age 92 now. So just a little bit of a mix up that he had there. It's 10.7 here at 92. If we go to the next page, it'll probably be up around that 14.2 at age 97 is my guess.
So meanwhile, while we've gotten 3.2 million of income, we got 10.
I mean, and you can see that these loans are significant at this point. The increase between 91 and 92, $500,000. Those are significant interest amount. Now, you can see the growth is also assumed to be that high. So this is a precarious policy at this point in time. I don't argue that at all. Like I agree with that. This is very risky if everything plays out to this point here and you're still choosing to take on all of the risk by utilizing the participating index. Whew, that's a lot of risk.
10 million that we owe 5% annually on. And in down years, you got to pay that no matter what. That's $500,000 annual expense just to manage that loan, even on down years, and you only got $600,000 of cash value. Can you say kaboom?
Now, I should say that is a lot of risk, and it could lapse the policy for sure. But you do have in your pocket that loan protection rider. So if you were willing to take on that kind of risk, you do have the possibility of triggering that loan protection rider if you need to, and walking away from the policy. Now, you're not going to get your stream of income. So if you were relying on that to survive, you're going to be in a challenging situation because you've just ran out of money that you needed to survive. Okay. So it's not all rosy, but at least your policy isn't going to lapse. You're not going to get a hit with a tax bill because your policy doesn't lapse if you use that overloan protection rider, or if you trigger that overloan protection rider. And it triggers if you borrow too much money. So if you end up with a 0 year, it could trigger if that drops below what that required amount is. Like you can borrow out, it depends on the carrier. I've seen 95% all the way up to 99% of the cash value. And they'll trigger that loan protection rider.
This thing is toast. It's going up in flames. And I mean, I could go back here and I could do the same thing. Like you got $6 million. Like, actually, let me go back to when you're 75 even, okay? You got $3.8 million, $431,000. If you have a negative year in that year, let's just do this. You have 4.8 million, right? Times 0.05. That's $240,000. You only have $431,000, right? You have 1 year like that. You got a $240,000.
I'm not sure where he's doing his math, but you can see right here, the loan charges for that year is 179,000. So if you get a 0 year that year, you're going to go down by 179,000. You just knocked your cash value almost in half, not quite. So you could survive 2 0 years in a row in that scenario. But yeah, we're talking that is risky if you put yourself in that situation. Now, is that something you're okay with? You've put in 160,000 into this at that point, and you've pulled out almost $2 million in income. You might still consider that a win. I would consider that a win still, right? I mean, it's not an ideal scenario because we don't want to see this thing lapse. Okay. But under the current assumptions, you've pocketed $2 million and you put in 160,000.
Extra interest expense. That's going to be taken as a loan against your cash value. It's going to increase your loan cost.
Yep.
And what that's going to do is increase your net amount at risk.
Nope. Does
And
not
that
increase
right
your net
there,
amount at risk.
1 year at age 75 in this situation is going to implode this policy. Okay. So that is, that like, man, I didn't even do that ahead of time. Like that is.
Yeah, you didn't do it ahead of time and you kind of rushed through the numbers there also. So it doesn't implode in 1 year in that scenario.
Mind numbing to me how agents can be selling this garbage and doing it feeling like they're doing it in integrity. It makes no sense to me how they feel they can do this. And so this is the same thing, but like I'm skipping this.
So this was also part of the reason why I felt this needed a response video, because I do sell these. I like this product. I think there's a lot of potential in this product. I love the guarantees that it has. I love the way that they allow me to design this product. And I think it's the minimal risks involved there, I'm more than willing to take on. Now, keep in mind, I put a lot of money into whole life as well. I think I've got my bases covered from that perspective. So I'm willing to put money towards these. In my portfolio, whole life makes up a significant portion of it. I've already got that covered. So there's no reason for me to continue plowing money into my whole life policies. I've got a significant amount that I'm putting into my whole life policies. Okay. I don't know what your situation is, but everybody comes at this from a different situation. Okay. And we're going to look at that. And the client ultimately has to decide which product is going to best meet their needs. I don't make the assumption that it's whole life that's going to meet their needs. Okay, we're going to look at the different options. They get to make that decision, but we're going to do it based on facts, not on fear mongering. And we're going to recognize the risks. We're going to talk about the ways to manage it. That's why I put out all of these videos.
Because we're talking about just getting into like crazy years. It's all the same concepts. You could see.
But to question my integrity because I sell this product when I actually understand how it works and I actually understand how the illustration works and where they're getting the numbers from. I'm not just looking at numbers that I don't understand and making guesses and assuming that this thing is horrible. You know, it deserved a response.
By the end of this, you got, if you live to 117 years old, you got $40 million of loan expenses, right? Like it's absurd. It's like anybody with a brain can figure out that's just unrealistic.
Yeah, I mean, that's at age 117. Yeah, I mean, if everything played out, again, we have to look at at that point, you're assuming everything prior to that has played out accordingly, which you already don't think it's going to, right? And it's most likely not going to, because, you know, who's going to want to take on that much risk at that point? But if the policy has performed that way for 116 years, why you would probably assume it's going to continue for another year. That's basically the bottom line.
This is just policy credits and charges. This is all stuff that we've covered. I'm going to pause on each page if you want to check to verify. There's nothing on this page that I haven't talked about already.
Yeah.
There's just a
These are all
bunch of
listed
redundancy in this. Same thing here. If you want to look at it, go for it. Same thing here. If you want to look at it, go for it. Same thing here. Just give you a second to get it. Boom. All right. So now when I talked about needing to take policy loans to cover the interest expense of your stuff, and that's going to increase the net amount at risk, which increases the cost of insurance, so on and so forth. So let's just jump right ahead. So this is the cost of insurance column. You can see this is where agents go, oh, well, IUL is cheaper than whole life. Well, yeah, it looks cheaper because of all this stuff,
It
right?
is.
Right.
It is
out of the
earlier
gate.
on.
Most of their charges are in their riders, as you can see.
There's a lot of years, decades and decades, that the cost of insurance is going to be lower in an IUL because that annual renewable term is cheap when you're young. Okay. Now, he just mentioned, and I paused it. I should wait to hear out what he says, but I'm guessing that he mentions most of the charges are in the riders. That's because of the design. There actually isn't any riders with any charges except for the supplemental term rider, which is the blended design of the term insurance that allows for reduced commissions. Okay. If there was no supplemental term blended into this, the cost of all of the cost of insurance would be under this column, and the per unit charge would be at least twice as much, probably 3 or 4 or 5 times higher, because the commissions are higher. So there's a trade-off. And not only that, but the cost of insurance is actually higher. So we get a lower, if you add both of these columns together, the cost of insurance and the rider charges, that gets you the total cost of insurance. Every year in the policy, you just look at it. That's the projection for the cost of insurance every year in the policy if you add both of those columns together, because the only rider with a charge is the supplemental term rider, and what it charges you for is the cost of that insurance that's non-commissionable. Okay, that's how we get these low per unit charges. Now, the per unit charge, I go through what all of these charges mean in a video, and I'll link that up here as well. So check that out, because I go into them in detail. But essentially, the per unit charge is where the companies recoup commissions that were paid out, money spent on underwriting, medical exams, ordering medical records, everything that it costs them to get that policy in force. Okay. They don't charge you all of it up front. So in this case, the commission was like a $1,300 commission on this policy. They don't charge you that all up front. They're going to spread it out over a number of years. And that's just the agent commission, right? There's all those other costs that are built into it. So overall, they recoup $6,000, right? That's what they spent. I mean, maybe there's some profit built into that, but that's essentially what they spent to get this policy put in force. This is the reason why they have surrender charges. They want to make sure that they're not charging you that much right out of the gate. They're going to spread that cost over time, but they need to be sure that you're going to keep with the policy, right? That's what surrender charges are for.
See here, right? That's where they go. So let's go to the next page. The rider charges is where they start to really get you. You can see the cost of insurance is always going to be.
So it's not the rider charges that they're getting you. That's how annual renewable term works. That's just the cost of insurance, and the reflection that you're getting older, the cost of that insurance is going up. So that's what we see happening here. That cost of insurance goes up. Now notice it was very cheap for like the first 30 years. And then you start to get a little bit older, it starts to creep up. It starts to creep up. And then when you get into your 60s, now it starts to get even more expensive. How much death benefit are you paying for at that time? That's what you've got to look at. And it doesn't show us on this particular page, so you have to flip back. But flip back and look. What is the death benefit we're paying for? We know at age 54, that there was $900,000 in this policy, and the underlying cost is $2,708. $900,000 in cash value that this insurance company is managing for you, giving you downside protection, giving you potentially unlimited upside growth. It's not really unlimited, but it's uncapped, right? So uncapped upside growth, and they're charging you $2,700. Where else are you going to find somebody to manage your money that will give you the potential to get 25% growth in a year with no losses, guaranteed no losses based on the investment performance, right? For that low of a percentage cost. I mean, that's a fraction of 1%. There's nowhere else that will do that. Now, whole life, you're not going to see what those expenses are. They're in there, and they're probably fairly low by that time as well. Okay, that's why we like cash value life insurance as a good place to put our money, because we have low costs compared to the amount of money that's being managed by these companies for us. It's a great place for it, but we got to take that into context. Okay.
Lower right there, right? Like that, they keep it reined in pretty well, but the rider charges is where it starts to go up. And what's going to happen here, because they've taken income starting at 54, what I want to show here is you could see that the cost of insurance goes down in this red area, but the rider charges take over and basically function as the cost of insurance, right? And that's where the fees get crazy. But at the end of the day, when you have issues where, you know, that $240,000 of interest expense that I was kind of showing you, right? When that happens at age 75, right? And you know, you wind up having to take that out of the cash value, and that increases the net amount at risk and doubles these charges, and then you have to take loans from it. And so now you have,
okay, that he keeps saying that net amount at risk is going to change. It's not going to change. It doesn't double these charges. So I don't know why he keeps mentioning that, but something to keep in mind: what happens if you didn't take a loan out of this? In this scenario, by age 85, you've probably got $10 million in here, and your cost inside the policy, $30,000. If you've got somebody managing $10 million of yours, and you're paying them $35,000, that's a huge win. That's a huge win. So we got to take that into consideration. And not only that, but if you died, they're going to pay out hundreds of thousands of dollars more than the $10 million in cash value they're managing for you and giving you potential growth on. So just because it's funny, because he acts like whole life is different. Whole life is exactly the same when it comes to the underlying cost of insurance. It's just that they spread those costs out over your whole life and kind of averaged them. So you pay a lot more for that death benefit early on. You're going to end up paying that same amount over the life of the policy, or approximately the same. Those, they can adjust based on mortality expenses, but it functions the same way. It's just that in the IUL, they charge you the actual cost of insurance each year in the policy. So it ends up being lower early on, more expensive later on. But you know what? If you get to age 77 and you see that the cost of insurance was $8,000 that year, and you know it's going up the next year, you don't have to keep that policy. It's not like you're locked into paying for this. You could take your cash value and walk away. You're going to pay taxes on the gains, but you could take your cash value at any point and walk away. You can just utilize the wash loan option or trigger the loan protection. So you don't even have to take your money out. You borrow out as much as you possibly can, trigger that loan protection rider, and walk away. You just took advantage of all of that cheap cost of insurance for decades, compared to the amount of money that they were managing for you and the growth that you were able to get in the policy. And then you said, okay, now that the cost of insurance is expensive, I'm going to move on. I'll go manage that money myself, or I'll have somebody else manage it. That's entirely an option that you can choose. It's not like you only have the choice of a lapsed policy or not. I mean, that's that's not the choices that you have at this point. At any point, you could just choose to walk away, take your money and go.
An extra 5% on that, another additional 240,000 plus the 8K, right? It all adds up. And that's why I always tell people it's 1 or 2 bad years at the wrong time in retirement for these policies, and everything goes up in flames, right?
It could, if you're not managing your risks, if you're not utilizing your loans properly, and you're choosing to take the loans that have the risk to it, and you don't have the cash value to sustain a couple of 0 years in a row, you're probably taking on too much risk. I would not recommend that for sure. But you got to recognize that you're going to have to manage your policy to some degree. Okay. This is where your agent comes in and helps out as well. If you're in this situation, you should be in contact with your agent when you're pulling out loans in retirement, when you're trying to manage that in retirement. You want to have an agent that you can talk to. Okay. You can always call and talk to the insurance company too, but ideally your agent is still around, or somebody who understands your plan. Okay. So like what I always tell my clients, the reason I like them to be educated on this, and why we have videos on this, is because they could buy a policy from me and then I get hit by a bus a week later. And if they were completely reliant on me for the success of their policy, odds are you're going to get assigned a new servicing agent, and they're not going to know, one, they won't know your plan. Two, they probably don't understand cash value life insurance the way that we do, and how to utilize these things for optimum cash growth throughout your lifetime, right? And the income stream. Maybe they will, but I would put the odds against it. So it's good that you know this stuff. Now, I also have team members, agents who I'm training and mentoring that will also understand this stuff. So if something does happen to me, I would say, ask one of my team members to be a servicing agent. I'm getting my website revamped, and we're going to have a whole page with all of our team members listed on there. These are all independent agents, just like me. They're not my employees. They're just people who have reached out to me and said, I want to do what you're doing. I want to design the best policies, and I would like you to show me how to do it. And so I do trainings with them every Wednesday, and there's going to be a lot of people out there that understand how to manage policies in the future. In this hierarchy, in this team of mine. So you're not just reliant on me surviving. Thankfully, there will be videos out there, but you can also reach out and have one of my team members help you if something were to happen to me and I'm unavailable.
It's really important to understand that. You could see when people say the cost of insurance is cheaper than whole life insurance. Look at the total policy charges, $946,000.
Yep.
This is absolutely nuts. You put in
167,000 by age. This is at age 97. Okay. The insurance company at that point has been managing $15-20 million of your money. Okay. $15 to $20 million of your money. You've pulled out $3 million in income, and your expenses above and beyond that. So even allowing for $946,000 in expenses, most of which is that cost of insurance in these later years. Okay. Most of which is the cost of insurance in those later years. So yeah, the expenses can get high because the cost of insurance is actually expensive. Here's a secret. It's also expensive in a whole life policy. There's no difference. I mean, there's kind of a difference. The whole life, they may assume that, you're not going to live till 97, and maybe the cost of insurance that they're going to spread out over your lifetime on that whole life policy might be less than this dollar amount. Okay. But it might not be. They may have these assumptions built in that if you're going to live that long, you're going to pay that much money. Go look at what the cost of $1 million in whole life is. I mean, or 500,000 even. In this scenario, there was quite a bit of insurance tied to this policy, 500,000 for the life of the policy. And at some points it went higher than that. You know, when you get into retirement, it has to be higher based on the net amount at risk. $500,000 of insurance is expensive. Okay. There's no way around that. But where do most of these charges happen? Well, look right here. At age 93, there's 73,000. Age 94, 57,000. Age 95, 33,000. Now, at that point, the insurance company is managing your money for free because the cash value is going to match the death benefit. So age 96, the cash value is going to match the death benefit. There's no more required insurance for that net amount at risk. The insurance company does not have to carry a net amount at risk. So they don't charge you anything, and you can see those costs go down to nothing, just the cost of policy charges fees, basically, or policy fees. There's a small cost here under the rider charges. So what was this total, though? Over those 3 years, 93, 94, 95, that's $150,000. So if you don't live to age 93, let's say you died at 92, you didn't pay $946,000 in expenses. You only paid $800,000. And most of the other charges came in those years right before that as well. So if you want to avoid all the bulk of those charges, let's go back to the page right before this. Page right before this. We're going to get there. Okay. So we've got our cost of insurance. The year before that, 82, 80, 76, 60. So let's say, oh yeah, look right here, at age 87, you're only at $429,000 in expenses. If you want to avoid another $500,000 in expenses that happens over the next decade, trigger the loan protection rider, walk away. You don't have to pay those expenses. If you don't think that you're getting a value from that, don't do it. You don't have to do it. Okay. It's possible that you don't live that long and you didn't incur all of those expenses. Okay. It's up to you. But we got to take these things into context. You don't just show the cost at age 97, ignoring the fact that most of those expenses happened within the last decade. That's over half. Over half of the expenses happened in the prior 10 years between ages 87 and 97. Look up here, by age 77, you've put in $167,000 or $164,000, and you've had expenses of $199,000. But what did you pull out in income? Assuming everything else is accurate about this illustration, obviously, I know I have to keep mentioning that. Well, if you started income at age 54 and you're now 77, that's 23 years of $77,000. You've pulled out $1.5 million in income. You've put in $164,000, your expenses were $199,000, and you've pulled out $1.5 million in income. That's a win. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Here at age 72, it was $157,000. The expenses were still less than what you've paid into it. And by that time, you've pulled out 18 years of income at $77,000. Like, those numbers are pretty good. Those are pretty acceptable in my opinion. So how do you get to the point where you want to decry that and say, oh my God, this is unbelievable. Nobody should buy this garbage. Well, you're ignoring the context. What has been the advantage that you were able to have over that time? Well, maybe you had $10 million in there and you got a 25% return on 1 year. And you know you don't have to sweat the next year when the market crashed. You still got all of that money because you didn't lose any when the market went down. Like, that's a heck of a deal.
Everything goes up in flames, right? It's really important to understand that. You could see when people say the cost of insurance is cheaper than whole life insurance. Look at the total policy charges, $946,000. This is absolutely nuts.
So just to be clear, the cost of insurance is less early on. That's when we hope to make all of our gains and get that compounding growth. And it leaves us with all the options that we can continue it or not continue it if we want to, if we're happy with what's happening inside of it, right? We don't have to keep continuing it. It does get more expensive the longer that you live. That's how annual renewable term works.
You've put in $164,000 in premium, and you've got $946,000 of charges. IUL, folks, is the most expensive piece of trash product on the face of the earth, and this is why. Anybody that doesn't look at this and take the time to read this, that's the problem. Too many people buy this without understanding it, and they're sold on the smoke and mirrors and the hype of the illustrations and the ledgers without reading all the fine print.
I can only assume that he's approaching this because that's the message that he wants to send. It's clearly false. It's not garbage. Those expenses can be high in those later years, but what is the benefit that you get from that? You definitely have to weigh that. So you don't just look at the numbers and decry it. You've got to understand the context around it. And I don't think that he's helping people understand the context around it with his video here.
And so now this is where the stuff comes in. So I think it's important to understand. I want to make a couple comments. The compound annual growth rate for any 4-year period in this sequence is 6%, right? So remember, this is a gross rate. That is a not net rate after all fees. That is just what you're getting credited. Then you got to back out all the charges and the fees, and then you'll get your net rate. That is what it is. This is their disclaimers to protect themselves when your policy lapses, and so they are protected against class action lawsuit. After you purchase a fixed index and index universal life policy, it's critical that you review it annually and react to the changing needs of the market conditions. You may also request an in-force illustration at any time during the life of your policy, which will show up-to-date policy values and will illustrate how the policy may react going forward. Yeah, that's all good stuff. I think you should do that whether you have IUL, whether you have whole life. I think it's important to be really in touch with what you're doing, have a real clear understanding about what's going on with your money, where is it going, how's it working, all these different things. But the bottom line, when I look at this, I go, man, this thing, it's just not going to stack up, you know, and it's not hard to see that, right? So I'm not going to go through all the different things, but it's just other important information here for people to understand. So if the cash value is less policy lapsing, if the cash value is less than the amount of the policy charge due, and your policy does not pass a policy protection test, your policy will enter a 61-day grace period. If your policy lapses, you will lose coverage and you may owe income tax on the money you took out, including any outstanding loan balances. So as we say that, actually, I want to do this. I want to go back here. This is going to be ridiculous. So we're on 45. I want to go back to the loans.
That disclaimer is exactly the same disclaimer that you would find in a whole life policy, because the same exact thing can happen in a whole life policy. You got to be responsible for how you're accessing the loans and make sure that you're not going to have that lapse. Now, one of the nice things about the IUL is we do have that loan protection rider. Almost every whole life policy does not offer that whole loan protection rider. There's only one company I'm aware of that does offer the loan protection rider with the whole life policy. So you got to be careful when you start taking loans out on a whole life policy, similar to what you might want to do with the loans in IUL, because you don't get that protection.
Let me see here. I want to go back to the loans right here. So if you went and this policy lapsed at 72 years old, because it's before they're 75, okay? And they had $1,363,000 plus $3,071,000 in loans. They could get hit with a tax bill if it lapsed in this year for $4.3 million. $4,300,000 is what they would get a tax bill on. Think about that. That is Absolutely.
So not quite accurate when it comes to those numbers, but essentially, yeah, the worst case scenario that I can envision in any life insurance policy is that you've been getting this tax deferred growth. You need to rely on the income stream that it's providing you, and you borrow too much. It doesn't, whether it's from 0% years or you just have to take too much, maybe the dividend, if it's whole life, your dividend rates come down, and like you need the amount of money that was projected. If you need that amount of money that was projected, whether that money is available in there or not, and it lapses, now you lose the income stream that you needed to survive, and you're going to get hit with a tax bill on the gains. The tax bill is just on the gains. So you've got 167,000, or in this one, 164,000. That's your basis. Subtract that from the overall growth in the policy, and that gives you the amount that your tax bill is going to be based on. All of that is going to be taxed as income. Like, that is the worst case scenario, adding insult to injury. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen, but that's the case whether it's IUL or whole life. So it's not unique to this product that you want to be concerned that the policy doesn't lapse when you get to a point where you're reliant on that income stream. Or really, at any time there's gains in the policy, we don't want to see a policy lapse and a tax bill as the result of it. Okay.
The absurd to me. That, yeah, gosh, it's just atrocious. It's just atrocious. I don't even have words. All right, let's go. I think we're getting near the end here. Additional. If your minimum monthly premium increases, you may need to pay additional premium to protect your policy from lapsing. In addition, if you make any of the above material changes, a new seven-year premium limitation will begin at that time, and you will have new premium limitations under Section 7702A of the Internal Revenue Code. And so this is just showing.
So he didn't explain what that means. That has to do with MEC limits. Basically, when you make a material change in the policy, the MEC limits are going to get recalculated. MEC limits are calculated on a 7-year rolling period, depending on your MEC test that you use. But in general, it's a 7-year rolling period. When we switch from option B to option A death benefit, we end up reducing the MEC limit to as low as possible, usually, because at that point, we're not planning on funding it any farther. Well, if you just want to reduce your amount of funding in the future, you don't need the high of MEC limit that you had before, you can do that too. You don't have to go to the minimum amount. But that's generally what we do to optimize for cash growth and for potential income, is we'll reduce that death benefit to the minimum allowed, and that will essentially reduce our MEC limit to 0. So you're not planning on, and you shouldn't be able to put any new money into the policy. You can pay loans back, of course, but just not new premiums. So that's what that last thing had to do with.
When the policy will lapse, age 35, on a guaranteed basis.
That's not age, it's policy year 35. But you can see the age is right over here, age 70, age 37. So anyways, remember the lapse years, it's in these other scenarios, it's assuming you're still going to continue to try pulling out that 77,000 a year. That's why it lapses at that time.
Or year 35, year 38 with the non-guaranteed assumption in the middle at the 5% crediting rating, and somehow year 103, which is 120 years old. Because this.
So this numeric summary is slightly different. This is not the 5%. Notice this says midpoint. So that's a slight change that happened. It's no longer the alternate scenario. This is assuming that 3%. It's right in between the 6 and the 0 here.
Person 17. So it would be like, that plus 17, that plus 17 is when they end on a guaranteed basis. And so, then they just, they got to sign it and they got to do all the things and like whatever, but is what it is. There is no assurance. I got this highlighted in red. There's no assurance that the investment products, because this is, what is this on? This is about a specific index. The S&P Dow Jones indexes. There's no assurance that the investment products based in the index and average will accurately track index performances or provide positive investment returns, right? So like, here's what I got to say at the end of this, like they got pages of these disclosures that you just got to read, right? So this is going through, this is a section all for the PIMCO index. It goes through it. I'm going to zoom in. I really don't have the energy to read this anymore. It's all the same stuff. It's basically saying they've licensed this. It's for the purpose, but they don't pick the investments, and you know they're not guaranteed to perform. And you know, you can see here it may lose value. They've got all these things. It's not FDIC insured. This is the Bloomberg index page. I would say read this, pause it if you want to see it, go through, go nuts. And
yeah, those are pretty dry reading. It's essentially anything that you might see anytime you touch anything having to do with the stock market. You ever go buy a mutual fund or an ETF, you get this huge prospectus that tells you all of the risks involved in it. And those things are massive amount of pages, right? So anything stock market related is required to have a lot of disclosures like that. For the most part, what it boils down to is, are you making money with it or are you not making money with it? I don't worry about the disclosures like that. Like, it's like when you go to a website and you have to approve their privacy policy. Are you going to read through those? No, everybody has them. Everybody's required to have them. We are hopeful that people actually read them and will alert if anything is untoward. But otherwise, we assume major company, a lot of people do business with them. They should be standard boilerplate, nothing surprising. And it's basically cover your butt stuff, right?
What this is showing, which is crazy, is that this is showing the internal rate of return based on compounding in this policy, based on current scenarios and taking all the variables of the policy into consideration. But once again, this is never, ever, ever going to happen. And I think if you don't see that by now, after all the detailed breakdown that I've given you in this policy, I don't know what to tell you. You get what you get when it comes to the results in your personal finances. If you put,
well, I agree. This is not going to happen exactly like this. It could be higher, it could be lower, but that has yet to play out, right? We don't know which way it will actually end up being. Is this a possibility? Yes. Is it possible it does better? Yes. Is it possible it does worse? Yes. Those are all possibilities. We have to make some types of assumptions, but I haven't seen anything in this video that he's pointed out that says this is definitely going to do worse. Nothing. In fact, if we look at the actual historical averages, there's a good chance it could do better. There just is. I mean, do you want to go with his gut assumption that it's going to do worse? Or should we look at the historical average? How old is he? 40 years old? He's slightly older than the index, right? How many years has he been doing this? As long as the index has been around? Maybe, probably not. So what makes his assumption any better than the actual historical average that's been happening? I don't know. I guess that's up to you to decide.
put your money into this product. So, like I said, how can an insurance company get you this 6 to 7% return almost over that long period of time when they can't do it for themselves, right? It's not going to happen.
They can't do it for themselves. He's mentioned that a couple of times. I didn't bring this up earlier. They can't do it for themselves. Really? They can't? Insurance companies with their general fund accounts have a lot of obligations and they're very conservative. So I wouldn't say that they can't. I would say they don't even try. They don't try to get that big of a return. They know it's not guaranteed that that return is going to be that way. So they have reserve requirements. They have hundreds of thousands or millions of customers reliant on them to be solvent to pay out any death benefit when it's needed. Okay. So you're not going to take an $8 billion general fund and go buy 1-year option contracts with that. That would be silly. Okay. But what they do offer is the ability for you, the client, to either get a fixed amount credit based on what they would otherwise just give you as growth in there, or you can choose to put it towards the options with the index options that they make available. That's your choice. I guarantee you that the traders that they have on the desk there could probably do a pretty dang good job if you gave them $100,000 to go play with in the market. They could probably manage that money pretty well as far as getting a return like this. Heck, on an average, if you just go into the S&P index, you're going to get a better return than this. But why would an insurance company do that with all of their general fund? Because they wouldn't, because it's risky. And they're not in the business of risk. They're in the business to mitigate risk. So their general fund accounts, they protect as best they can, which means they invest in bonds, almost exclusively in bonds. That's like the biggest part of their portfolio. And you know this. So why are you misrepresenting this as if this isn't even possible, because otherwise they would do it with all of their billions of dollars in their general funds? No, the goals are different. Just like your clients and my clients are going to have different goals with different money. We're not going to tell our clients to plow every penny they have into this product because you're going to get a 6.9% return. That would be silly, right? But you might allocate a portion of your investment options into it. You might allocate some of your money to go to whole life. You might allocate some of your money to go to rental real estate and some of your money to go in the stock market. Each one is going to have a different goal and a different set of expectations, as well as a different set of risks. But it's our clients that are going to have to decide where to put that money. But to say that, why doesn't the insurance company invest all of their general account to get 6.9% if this is realistic? Like, that's a disingenuous comment in my mind. Why would you frame it that way unless your goal is to paint it as if it's not even possible and you're just being hoodwinked to think that that is possible? I completely disagree with the statement that he's making in regards to this and the way that he's claiming it. And my only assumption is that it's a disingenuous thing, because I think he's smarter than that.
It is what it is. You can see it just gets better and better and better. Not going to happen. Read it. Go ahead. I don't think it's anything new or special, but this is the end of it. You can see this policy. This is just the policy specifics page, how they designed it. You can see it's an option B increasing up until age 64. I don't know why it's increasing to 64. I think that's a mistake. That's the only real design flaw that I saw, because they start taking income, I think, at 54.
Right. So realistically, it should have changed at age 54. He's right about that. The reality is it probably doesn't matter, because in these juvenile policies, the cash value grows so much. And when we switch from an increasing to a level, the death benefit doesn't really drop. And I think if we go back and we look at the actual death benefit, I don't think it drops below 500,000. It's the net amount at risk has to be higher because the amount of cash value that's generated inside these, inside the policy.
So they should have this at age 54 and then change it to being a level death benefit option A at age 54.
Yep.
Or 55 through maturity, right? That's what they should have done. They didn't do that.
Right. And like I said, I'm assuming that it didn't matter, but most likely what happened is they probably designed this policy originally with an income stream starting at age 65. And then the client probably said, oh, well, what if they pull an income at 54? And so they changed the income date and they didn't change this. They didn't update that. Most likely, I'm guessing that was the situation, because when I'm meeting with clients, we play around with these numbers. It takes seconds to plug in different numbers and look at the difference in potential growth, potential income, what's the impact of this, impact of that. So it works out really good when people meet with me because I share my screen, we plug in the different numbers and we see what comes out, and we do it all in real time so they can ask questions and we can do it that way. A lot of times there's agents out there, they don't know what they're doing. They don't design their own illustrations, and you'll ask them to get you an illustration. It'll take them a few days. That's because they're having somebody else do the illustration. They don't know how to do it. And then if you want to see a change, you're like, oh, what happens if it's in this? Well, now you got to wait another couple of days to get that illustration design. And so you tend to not play around with the numbers in that situation because it could take a year for you to get a policy at that point, right? If you want to see a bunch of different scenarios. So it's helpful to work with somebody who does understand these things and can make those changes in real time while we're meeting. And I look forward to doing that if anyone is interested.
Once again, it would be trash either way, this product. But that is the mistake that I saw, the only mistake that I saw on that side of it. But ultimately, guys, this is the number one IUL product that's being sold by independent advisors out there right now that are in the index universal life space.
Yeah,
this is the number one product. Yet somehow, as you see, like this is why I always say they never perform as illustrated. And you can see why I'm saying that now. Hopefully it makes sense. I believe personally that the reason this is the number one sold product right now is because it's the number one compensated product. You can earn up to 155% commission by selling this product. It is, to me, an atrocity that people.
So it's not compensated any differently than other carriers and even whole life products. I mean, there are different percentages out there, but dollar for dollar in the IUL space, Allianz does pay a higher commission on the commissionable insurance amount. So if you get $100,000, which is the minimum amount of death benefit, if you get $100,000 death benefit with Allianz or National Life or any of the other carriers, the Allianz one is that target premium, that number that determines the commission, is higher with Allianz. Yep, for sure. But the biggest advantage comes in with Allianz when we start to do our blended design, when we can blend in that non-commissionable term insurance. And Allianz allows us to blend in more than everybody else, although equal with one of the other carriers out there. If you're over the age of 18 and below the age of 50, we can do a 10-to-1 blend design. That means at $1 million or $1.1 million in death benefit, the agent's going to make the same commission as if they sold you $100,000. At that point, Allianz is not more expensive than all those other carriers. In fact, it could be quite a bit less expensive than all those other carriers. And when we look at the dollar amounts that you're able to shove into your policy, it's a lower commission, far lower commission than what you would pay out on a whole life policy with the same type of MEC limits, the same type of ability to fund it. So the reason that this product is the number one product out there is not because of that target premium being higher on that base amount. In fact, Allianz has the number one selling IUL out there when it comes to premium dollars put into the product, but it is not the number one product out there when it comes to total target premium. So that tells me there's a lot of agents out there that are designing these properly, and people are putting a lot of money into it because it is a really, really good product. They have great index options. They have really good bonus options. They have good guarantees. And overall, this is just an amazing product. I like this product a lot. It has nothing to do with the commission. And every policy I design minimizes the commission. It minimizes the commission. Now, I see some out there that don't. People illustrate, other agents out there sell this product with a higher commissionable amount of term insurance. Those are not great. They're okay, but they're not great. I would not want those. Like, the amount of commission that goes out in these definitely impacts your ability to see growth. So it's important that we manage that. And remember, I showed you what policy charge to look at where they recoup those commissions. So if you ever have any questions about a design of a policy that you're getting, sign up for a meeting with me. I'm happy to walk you through it. But yeah, just it is not because it's the highest selling out there. Just because you have a product out there that has a higher commissionable amount that goes to the agent does not mean that's why it's getting sold. In fact, it's kind of interesting because a lot of insurance companies out there, whole life and IUL in that space, will incentivize their agents. They're not giving them higher commissions. They're not giving them more of that target, but they'll offer trips. They'll fly you out to Hawaii or Barbados or somewhere hot and warm and sunny if you sell enough of their products. Where does that money come from? It comes from the insurance company, and you can bet that they're going to recoup those costs in some way. Allianz doesn't do that. They don't offer any trips. They just give a higher amount back to the agents, as opposed to the few agents that might end up earning those trips. If they offered trips, I would probably earn them. I do. I sell a lot of this product, but I'm a big fan of it. And I make sure that we do the best designs. And I talk to my clients realistically about the expectations. I also sell a whole lot of whole life insurance. And we make sure we have the best designs. And we minimize the commission in every policy that we do, at least as much as it makes sense for the policy design. As it happens in an IUL, you always want to reduce the commission as much as possible. There is basically no scenario that you're better off not reducing the commission, unless there is a product out there that effectively it reduces the MEC limit if you try to do a design that reduces the commission. I just assume that carrier doesn't give us the ability to reduce the commission, even though it looks like, even though they actually do give us the ability to reduce the commission, there's no benefit to it for either the client or the agent. So I don't ever sell that product, but just know that that's out there. And there are other carriers out there that don't give you the ability to reduce a commission at all. So, and in the whole life space, same thing. Some carriers allow us to reduce the commission more than other carriers, and some of them it's more beneficial. When we compare the designs in it, there can be some scenarios in whole life where you maybe don't want to go with the lowest commissionable design because of how those policies function in the future and compared to what your actual needs are. Okay. But there is almost no scenario in an IUL where that ends up being the case. So just something to keep in mind. And if you ever have any questions, you guys are always welcome to sign up for a meeting with me. Everything I do is via Zoom with people, via my Calendly. I put that link up earlier. I'll put that link up again here so you can see it again if you're interested in meeting with me. I'm always willing to talk to people about this stuff, even other agents. If you're an agent out there and you want to get some more information on how you can better help your clients, let's talk.
People would sell this to people, and that advisors either are unaware that this is how it works, or they're implicit in it and they're aware and they're just making money off the tears of their clients. I heard a guy say that one time about an IUL, and I was like, oh man, God, that's funny.
So some people definitely can. There are bad IULs in this space. This is not one of those. Okay. This is not one of those. This is a good design that he just tried to criticize really badly, and hopefully I was able to debunk the negative approach that he took to that and enlighten you on how these things work. It looks like this is basically the end of this. We'll see if he says anything else.
Steal that. So here I am stealing it. So anyway, I'm pretty bold in my opinion, pretty bold in my stance. I understand that I'm going to have a lot of people that disagree with me. But I'm no interest in opinions. I just want fact. If you can tell me one thing that I said on here that was wrong, tell me, and let's have a conversation about it.
I think I've said more than one thing, and maybe he watches this. If you do watch it, I look forward to your response.
This is just one example. I'm trying to do illustration reviews on all different index universal life companies and products or whatever. So if you have one that you're interested in, send it to me. I'll do an evaluation of it. I'll do exactly what I just did right here, and we'll go from there. So if you have it.
Well, let's just hope that he learns a little bit more about the product that he's criticizing. Although it's going to be a heck of a lot easier to criticize those other companies' illustrations. This just happened to be the best product out there, in my opinion, in this space. A lot less room for criticism in that regard. So thanks. Let me stop this screen share. Thanks for joining us for this. I hope it was helpful for you, enlightening, and just realize, bottom line, there's good products in the IUL space. There's good products in the whole life space. Each one serves a different actual need, in my opinion, and we don't need to hate on them all. Let's just make sure we get the best designs and get our clients the right information so that they can make an accurate, informed decision for what they need to have happen. So appreciate you joining me. Thanks a lot. Keep an eye out for part 3. I'm going to take that illustration that he did. I'll see what I can do as far as copying it. I should be able to copy it exactly. And then we'll see how it looks if we tweak a few things.
Hope you found value in today's video. If you'd like to find out more about IUL and the whole life, check out these videos right over here, and we'll see you next time. Now go maximize your cash flow.